Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's we're going to be talking about the sales month of January, aka next month, because there is a lot of potential for deals to be had in January. Before we get into this video though, as always, if you're going to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. And then if you want to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day. Let's get into it. Let's first talk about the historical significance of January as a sales month for car dealers. It is typically known as a pretty crappy month for car dealers for a number of reasons. First off, January happens to happen right after December, and this is very important because December is usually a month that's pretty good for car dealers because you have a lot of end of the year pushes. First off, car dealers, right, want to get rid of all of their quote unquote old age inventory, or actually their new inventory that will soon be old age, because believe it or not, there's a huge mentality shift with buyers once a vehicle is no longer the model year that we are in. So like if right now we're going into 2023, if a vehicle is on a dealer lot and it's a 2022 and it's brand new, people see it as old, even though it could be a brand new vehicle and the dealer could have just received it off of a transport truck like that day. That's just the buying mentality. So dealers know this, manufacturers know this, so they want to get rid of as many of those vehicles as they can before the end of the year. And frankly, they just want to meet, end of the year goals. So you usually see dealers, discounting a little bit more in December. Sometimes you also see manufacturers releasing more incentives. And so customers obviously see that push and they take advantage of that to get those end of the year deals. And then you have customers that are also purchasing vehicles in December because they're getting a Christmas present for someone. And then you have business owners that are purchasing vehicles in December because they're trying to get a tax write-off at the end of the year. You've got Section 179, right? If you buy a vehicle that has a gross vehicle weight rating of over 6,000 pounds, then you can literally deduct the entire vehicle for that tax year. This is huge for business owners that are trying to lower, the tax bracket that they are within. And so you have all these groups that are just converging in December and buying like crazy. And once December ends, well, the buying ends, because why would you buy a Christmas present for someone in January? If you're a business owner, why would you buy a car in January unless you absolutely need it? Because again, you're not going to get any sort of tax benefit from buying that car in January until the next tax year. And again, with business owners, you typically just don't want to spend money in January because you've got quarterly taxes for most businesses due, middle of January, and then you're going to have your yearly taxes due in April, unless you file for an extension, which would then push it, into the middle of the year. And so you probably want to not spend money in January, right? And that's very important because, well, business owners tend to buy a lot of vehicles. And then, you don't have, the crazy incentives and pushes from dealers and manufacturers because they wanted to meet their end of the year goals. And once they meet those goals, then they're like, okay, we're going to take the gas off. We're not going to sell as many cars, but, we're going to try to make more money per unit. And that's what a lot of dealers will try to do in January. And so it'll really pull back on volume. And that's why January, again, is generally seen as a pretty bad month because a lot of dealers just don't sell as many cars. And I want to quickly touch base on one more thing before we dive a little bit further into this video, and that is that whole tax subject. This is something else that puts a lot of downward pressure on January as a sales month. There are not people popping in to dealers in January with their big fat tax returns. Every single year you have people file taxes, March, April range. Sometimes they push things off a little bit too late and file it late, but regardless, in that range. And so, if they have any sort of return, then they take that return and they go spend it somewhere. And a lot of times it's at a car dealership, and well, you're not going to see that in January. And so there's just a lot of reasons for people to basically not buy in January. So with all this in mind, you can now see that January can be a time where you can get some pretty good deals on a new or a pre-owned vehicle, and let's dive into that. First off, on the new car side of things, well, if dealers have inventory left over that's now considered quote unquote old age because it's last model year, then there's a chance for you to wheel and deal. And what you'll typically see is once December ends, manufacturers will pull back with their incentives on current model year vehicles. So again, we're going into 2023. So you'll probably see some incentives stripped away from 2023 model year vehicles. But they usually don't strip away the incentives on the old age, the old model year vehicles, so 2022s. So what you'll usually see is those incentives from December will basically go into January on the old age units, and sometimes they'll even increase. And so this just means that you have even more negotiating power with this quote unquote old age inventory, even if the vehicle was just dropped off a week ago. It's now 2022 and it's 2023, right? And then there are potentially going to be more incentives on that inventory as well. And so January can be a pretty good time to buy because, again, like I mentioned earlier in the video, you don't have the rush of tax, people coming in yet. And so that means that there's going to be more availability with these vehicles. If you wait until tax time, a lot of the time you won't be able to find the vehicle you're looking for. And it's like, oh, I can get $10,000 off of MSRP, but I can't find one. Whereas, maybe in January you'll get $9,000 off MSRP, but then you'll be able to find one. Just throwing out random numbers, but you guys get the point. And so if the deal makes sense in January, then, it's usually a good time to go while inventory is still available on the new side with old age units. Now, if we jump from that to the used car market, well, just like the new car market, values do decline in January. However, like I've talked about several times on this channel, wholesale values tend to lag behind retail values. So what this means is that usually you'll see just used vehicles across the board from December to January go down in value within the wholesale market, but then the retail values will take a few months to go down. But then usually by the time the retail values go down, they rebound back up in springtime because tax season and buying and people are willing to pay because they just want to get cars because they just got their tax returns. And so it's always a weird rebound effect. But regardless, just know that with a used car in general, you have a little bit more negotiating power with the dealership and say, hey, I'll get this off of your hands now instead of you having to, pay interest on this vehicle sitting on your lot for the next 3 months until someone with their tax returns comes in and buys it. And then one car category that I want to talk about that's both in the used and new car category that can be had for a pretty good deal in January is sports cars. Now, everyone knows that sports cars sell for higher amounts in the spring and summer, and they usually sell for lower amounts in the fall and in the winter. And well, January is no different. And January is usually a pretty good month to purchase a sports car because it's usually deep enough in the winter for most places in the US that people don't even want to think about driving a sports car or think about buying a sports car, frankly, because if they buy it, well, there's usually ice or snow on the ground and they wouldn't be able to drive it whatsoever. And so the negotiating power with sports cars is usually pretty solid. And, if you're willing to, not have a car for a super long time and not be able to fully enjoy it, then a lot of times you can pick up a sports car from November through January and basically, just drive it for a few months and then sell it in spring, early summer, and maybe potentially make a little bit of money. You'll probably not make a massive amount of money because the fluctuations aren't huge, but it's enough that there's usually some leeway to where you can basically usually drive the sports car for free, which I think that's always fun. And finally, when it comes to this specific January, this might be a really good January to purchase a vehicle if you can find the right deal, because you have an added push of negotiating power with the fact that manufacturers, dealerships, and consumers feel like 2023 is going to be a horrible year. Everyone feels like 2023 is just going to be economic doom and gloom. And so because there's a lot of fear leading into next year, dealers might be willing to work with you more than they normally are during January because they just really want to sell cars. They're like, we got to keep this hamster wheel going as long as we can until, it just stops going because, who knows? 2023 is a new year, and with everything that we're seeing right now, it could be good, it could be bad, we don't know. But because there's enough fear right now, you can use that fear to your advantage as a buyer, as, again, an extra negotiating push. So that's going to sum things up with our video talking about January, and hopefully this helps you out if you are currently shopping for a car. And, I wouldn't stop the shopping just because, the quote-unquote December deals, and because there are quite a few January deals. Sometimes, yeah, you got to look a little bit and you got to ask, but there definitely are deals to be had. And I guess that's the last thing that I want to emphasize. There isn't going to be nearly as much advertising in January as there is going to be in December because, again, dealerships and manufacturers don't expect to sell as many cars in January because they just think that people aren't really in the market to buy as much. And so you're not going to see stuff like thrown in front of your face. You're going to have to ask for it. That's the big thing with January. You're going to have to ask for the deals. They're not going to be so upfront like they are in December, for example. So I'll see you guys.